Hello, making a video today about the evolution of the American USGI infantry rifle, dated from the beginning of World War II up until today. I'm going to call this video US Rifles World War II to present, something along those lines. Anyway, I was inspired to do this video by a video done by sure you all know Hickok45 on YouTube, who made a comprehensive video like this, but he dated back to, I believe, 1886, something along those lines. Maybe it was earlier than that, 1873, I can't really recall. It must have been earlier than 1873 because he had muskets and such on the table, but anyway, you get my point. However, he was had a couple holes, and basically I just have, I've added a couple, really only 2 rifles from this time period that he didn't have, and he even mentioned that in the beginning of his video about not, bringing out just what he had, and I had a couple things that I think that would complement that, and I was going to go a little bit more depth about the history of these rifles. I'm not necessarily obviously going to shoot them in this video because I'm in my living room, but maybe I'll do a second video where I fire some of these or some of the most popular ones here. Anyway, I'll go ahead and get started. So here at the end we have the 1903 Springfield. This is the 03A3 model, and what you'll realize is that at the end of World War I, or the version that they had, the 03A1, had a front sight, which would have been located right up here. It was mounted right here, and then you had a back V-notch sight. The sighting system was not very good at all, so what they did is the U.S. military it was really about this time that it was marked, wanted to go to the peep sight configuration, which is actually on every single surface rifle from this period up until today, that you'll see on the AR-15, or I'm sorry, the M16A4s and the M4 carbines. You have that nice peep sight with elevation, and all your controls for your sighting system is on the back of the rifle for your windage and elevation. All other features are pretty much the same. You have a 5-round box magazine. It's a bolt action rifle, and it's chambered, of course, in 30-06. This particular example is Remington. It's made by Remington, and Remington did not manufacture rifles during World War I, but they did begin production of the 1903A3 Springfield rifles, along with Smith Corona and, of course, Springfield Armory, and I think Rock Island Arsenal as well. Did some. Anyway, so the stock, the bolt, everything, everything on this firearm is Remington, including. Let's see, see if I can get you a video. The barrel there, and it's the barrel is dated of April of 1943. Remington Arms Manufacturing. Anyway, this was when we entered World War II. Of course, we entered war with Japan. And we were fighting in the Pacific just after Pearl Harbor. We, of course, hadn't declared war in Germany at this point in time. And this was the rifle that we entered the war with. And this is really the soldiers that fought in World War I that were using the 03A1 variation of this rifle, as their kids and grandkids went to war using basically the exact same rifle that they had used 20 or 30 years prior. So it was very outdated technology. And of course, the War Department wanted to go with something a little bit more updated, which brought us to the M1 Garand, which was adopted for service in 1936. And of course, the major defining characteristics or improvement in this rifle is it's fed from an 8-round in-block clip, which is, of course, fed from the top of the rifle. I'm trying to do this with one hand, I'm sorry. It's fed on the top of the rifle here. There's 8 rounds. These were made primarily during World War II, and correct me if I'm wrong, but just from Springfield Armory. I know some of these were made in Italy after the war by Beretta, as well as HRA and National Harvester made these, and these were used in service until, I believe, 1956 or 1957 through the Korean War. So anyway, this particular is a Springfield model, and it's in the 800,000 block. There were a total of over 6 million of them made. And this particular one has early World War II characteristics. It's got this takedown ring where you can slide in a bullet to take this out to remove your trigger group. The later ones into the Korean War, this was just a single milled piece that just went straight through. This loop was gone, so that's a good characteristic of knowing how old your rifle is. And then of course you can view by the serial number back here kind of what range puts your manufacturer. Also, a lot of these models that they are rebarreled after World War II with 1956, 1954, etc. dated barrels for the Korean War, and even rebarreled after that. And these, the M1 Garand rifle was even used in through Vietnam to some extent, to some limited extent, but this particular one has the 1943 dated barrel. So everything on this is original. I believe the stock is actually, I'm pretty sure the stock is an Arsenal rebuild stock, not the original one that was on it, unfortunately. Then we come over to the M1 carbine, which was adopted for service in the year of 1942. And a lot of you know the name Carbine Williams that goes along with this, and really he invented the operating system for a carbine, but I believe it was Winchester who went in and actually fine-tuned and finished designing of this rifle. Now, this particular version is an M1A1 carbine made by Inland General Motors Division. This is an original M1A1 carbine. This is not a reproduction. If you are aware of the M1A1 carbine, every single one of them was made by Inland. So if you have a quote-unquote paratrooper carbine or M1A1 carbine, and the receiver back here, the manufacturer's mark, is not Inland, then it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not an original stock, but it means at some point in time a different receiver was put into the stock. All the stocks, paratrooper stocks and receivers, were made by Inland. This particular one is a let me make sure here. Yeah, it's a 6.3 million serial number. And production of the M1A1 stopped at the very end of 1944 in the 6.5 million range. This is very, very late war, but this particular one is all correct. It's all original M1A1 parts. The parts number back here was there's a parts number back here on this buttstock, and it ends, you have a number and then you have a dash and then numbers 3 through 12. This one's a dash 11, so the stock is very late. You of course have your rivets. Reproduction ones will have very flat and big drawn out rivets, and I'm not going to go into too much detail. I can make a separate video on this. There's a leather cheek rest here. The P acceptance cartouche was moved from the pistol grip and was later replaced with the cross cannons for late war production. So everything about this stock is late war. It's got the low wood cut and the receiver for the relief for the operating rod, and it's got a Type 2 sight, which is correct. This wasn't replaced for the Korean War. This was actually made with this Type 2 sight, milled instead of stamped, which was this Type 3 sight was stamped. And then you have a Type 2 barrel band. It's a little bit thicker, but it doesn't have the bayonet lug, and that was also correct for the end of 1944. This likely did not see service in World War II. It may have seen service in Korea. The sling on it is a 1956 dated USGI sling, so Korean era. So this is just a nice example of a kind of end of World War II, most likely a Korean used weapon. Now that takes us, like I said, these weapons were used in the Korean War. When we got towards the end of the Korean War, actually at the end of the Korean War into the early stages of Vietnam, we went into the M14. This particular rifle is a M1A, a Springfield M1A, standard model. I do have it in a original M14 stock. You can see the cutout for the selector switch, which of course this doesn't have because it's a civilian semi-auto model. You have your Korean War canvas web sling. This was basically the U.S. Ordnance Department wanted to make an updated version of the M1 Garand. However, they wanted to make some improvements, and some of those, and the most obvious improvements, is that it was fed from a 20-round box detachable magazine, as opposed to the M1 Garand, which used, of course, the 8-round clip and a fixed magazine. It used a straight operating rod, as opposed to the M1 Garand has a curved operating rod, which you'll see is it's under the stock. You can't necessarily see, but this is a straight op rod, which was believed to have increased the rigidity, mainly because, and the biggest difference is, of course, we touched on, is this was meant to be select fire, so used in fully automatic. This was chambered in the .308 round, 7.62 by 5.1 NATO. And you can imagine that the recoil of this firearm was incredibly difficult to manage from the general soldier who was handed this rifle for the field. Now, the Ordnance Department did have very favorable demonstrations of this rifle being used by very trained and skilled and qualified riflemen who were able to control it on fully auto, on its fully automatic operation, if you want. The word's escaping me now. However, like I said, when you put this in the hand of the general soldier, it really, and from the words of a documentary I saw, it quickly turned this into an anti-aircraft weapon, because by about the fourth or fifth shot, you are pretty much aiming up at the sky if you didn't take that finger off the trigger. A very hard round to control, and they had the same problem with the FAL, which was also a .308, an even lighter firearm than this, back in the 1950s and 60s through its fully automatic variation. Anyway, the M14, the life of the M14 was very short-lived. It did see very early stages of Vietnam. However, certain departments of the U.S. military are currently using this rifle as a designated marksman's rifle. It is very accurate and very robust and rugged. But that did bring us over to the M16A1, and the transition between these rifles is very interesting. The M16A1, of course, designed by Eugene Stoner and Armalite, used very lightweight aircraft aluminum and composite parts. Eugene Stoner worked for Fairchild, which was a company which designed aircraft parts. So he had engineering experience, and he had the expertise and equipment to basically machine and mold and craft parts for this rifle, which he created. The first practical variation that he created was the M16A1, which this actual version in front of you was a Colt SP1, which was the same rifle as the M16A1. However, it was made for the civilian market, so therefore lacked the full automatic capability of the Vietnam era, M16A1, which was fully automatic. The folks in charge of the Ordnance Department hated the idea of this rifle, and they truly believed that this rifle was going to get a lot of soldiers killed in Vietnam. They were really traditionalists, and they believed in very robust wood and steel guns, and most importantly, very high caliber weapons. The military really prized, especially the Marine Corps, prized themselves with having very trained and skilled marksmen who were able to deliver very accurate fire at the enemy. And basically, this produced, in their opinion, better outcomes in terms of larger number of casualty of the enemy on the battlefield, as well as a lower amount of spent ammunition, which is also better for being able to produce more ammunition for the money that the military had, and to basically not create waste. They believe that if we gave the soldiers fully automatic weapons that were controllable, such as and I know the M14 was fully automatic, but it was really meant for burst fire and controlled fire. And it was meant to, I'm sorry to touch back on this, but it was also meant to take over the role of many different weapons which were in the arsenal, including light and heavy machine guns, which is why there's this flip-out butt pad. So to really just put this in the hand of the rifleman and say, okay, we have 20-round magazines of this very light 22 caliber ammunition, the 223 or 5.56. We're going to expend a lot of ammunition, and not only that, but the very light caliber is going to be horrible at penetrating the clothing and gear of the enemy, and also penetrating through the brush and debris in the jungles of Vietnam. However, of course, the M16 would have been very practical because the Vietnamese soldiers are very good at concealing themselves and firing from unidentifiable positions and using guerrilla tactics. So this whole concept of firing at only what we can see and using rifle cartridges which were designed to touch, send out accurate fire up to 1,000 yards was very impractical. During the testing of this rifle at the Aberdeen Proving Grounds, a lot of the higher-ups, I'll call them, in charge were practically changing out parts, removing parts, and basically compromising the validity of the rifle. Eugene Stoner was having to contend with a lot of these people to basically, it was not getting a very fair reception, basically, as it was being trialed as a military, as a replacement as the U.S. July infantry rifle. Until McNamara got his hands on this rifle and checked it out and said, we definitely need to produce more of these rifles, and basically overrided the Ordnance Department and said, we are going to produce them and it will be our service rifle. So McNamara kind of single-handedly alone, and this group of colleagues known as the Whiz Kids basically pushed this rifle through into service, and it became a rifle in Vietnam. Some of the defining characteristics of this rifle, as opposed to its later family members, which I'll touch on in a moment, is you had your A1 style sights, which were only adjustable by, there's a little button here, you use the tip of a round to push that in, you can adjust the elevation of your sight here. The windage was, of course, on the front post, up at the front. This is an SP1, obviously. It's also known as a slab sight, so you're losing your fence here, which was on the original rifle. Also, you have a teardrop forward assist on the original M16A1, which this rifle does not have. Again, this is the civilian version, but this is as close as I can get. Really, the two major defining characteristics between this rifle and its later related brothers are it had a triangular hand grip made out of hard plastic or Bakelite, and what was known as a pencil barrel. And the barrel you see is very, very, very thin, and I'll compare that to the M16A2. Now, the M16A2, as we get in here, as you can see, the distinguishing characteristics is the forward assist is round instead of teardropped. Your buttstock is elongated. It's a longer buttstock than on the A1. You have a thicker barrel with a birdcage flash hider. I know this has a birdcage flash hider on it as well, but again, this is the civilian model. The A1 had a 3-prong flash hider. And you, of course, had the ribbed hand grips. They did move to a 30-round magazine. The M16A2 was moved from a fully automatic firing capability since it's the A1, to a 3-round burst. This particular model in front of you is a Colt AR-15A2 Sporter 2. In every way, shape, and form is like the M16A2, except for just a couple things. The M16A2 had a complete sight assembly back here, which had knobs for controlling windage and elevation. This is the exact same sighting system as on here. However, that was not true. And the early M16A2s did have this, only for a year or so. For the most part, they had a complete sight assembly back here for controlling windage and elevation. The Marine Corps especially wanted this because they wanted, of course, like I said, they prize accuracy. They wanted the controls for the shooter to be all back here and comprehensive and easy to use and easily adjust. Then it was moved to, again, I said, the 3-round burst capability. This is a very robust and good rifle. We adopted this in, I believe, about 1982 or 83. It was used in Desert Storm. Actually, there's still plenty of them used in the military today. And that's about it on that I can think of. From the M16A2, we also developed the M16A3, and the A3 is in every way, shape, and form identical to this rifle, the A2. However, they went back and implemented a full round a fully automatic selection, so semi-automatic, safe, and full auto. And I think that was intended mainly for the use of the Navy. I could be wrong on that, but it didn't see nearly as much service as the A2. Then we move to the M4 carbine. This is a Colt AR-15. It is an M4 made by Colt, LE6920. And these were adopted into service in 1994. And of course, you see the shorter profile barrel. The military issued rifle was a 14-inch barrel. This particular one is 16-inch, of course, because it's a civilian model. It did have fully automatic fire capability, and it was really, lately the United States has been involved in wars. We've been doing a lot of rural type conflict and being in cities and small towns and villages. So the compactness is definitely very appropriate for service today, or for being in the close confines. It still maintains a 223 or 556 cartridge and the 30 round magazine. You do see a lot of specialized optics on these modern use weapons, as well as backup or primary iron sights. A lot of the M4 carbines also have a rail for a detachable carry handle. So you'll have the A2 style carry handle, but they are detachable. For, of course, putting on optics. This is an aim point optic on there, red dot. And that's about it. Basically, after that, in the year 2004, we've adopted, and which is our current service rifle, the M16A4, which is just like the M4 carbine. However, it's just basically the same barrel length as the M16A2. I don't have one, but it's basically just the M4 with a 20-inch barrel. That's all it is. Everything else is the same. Anyway, that's a comprehensive overview of the rifles and carbines from, here's my dog and guinea pig, anyway. Rifles and carbines from the beginning of World War II to today. If you have any questions or would like to see some more information about these, or I can go into these individually in more detail, I'd be happy to do that. I just thought it would be fun to kind of put this out, even for my own use. Anyway, thank you very much for watching and have a good day. Bye-bye.